Hector here. I'm going to be doing a little series here. Like I mentioned before, you know, one of my goals for this year is to be able to attend these side straddle splits on a pair of phone books. So what I'm going to be doing is going to be basically reverse engineering how to get to that side straddle split. And this is just something that I'm going to have to be very persistent with on practicing each and every day as a part of my exercise portion of my Miracle Morning practice. And so I'm going to cover some of the stuff that we're going to be doing. So I highly encourage you to join me if this has ever been a goal of yours, or if you just want to join in on the fun. I think this is going to be a great little journey. So you know, one of the most important things we do want to address, you know, clearly check with your doctor or anything like that to make sure that you are okay to start doing something like this, because this is going to be a pretty intense practice. One of the first things we want to focus on doing is making sure that we know how to breathe. Okay, so we breathe, I don't even know the number, it's something like 26,000 times a day, some crazy number. And of all those times, of all those breaths that we're taking, we're not even breathing properly. And a lot of it is due to stress, emotion, and poor posture. So one of the things we want to focus on doing is we want to focus on breathing into the belly and not into the chest. So when we breathe into the chest, that means our chest starts to expand first. So you can do a little test, like a little test by putting your hand on your stomach and one hand on your chest, and you can start to breathe and figure out what's moving first. Is your belly moving first? Is your hand moving first? And that'll give you an idea of where you're at. And what you want to focus on doing is just allowing the breath. You want to breathe straight down and out. Okay, straight down and out, like you're filling up this cylinder of oxygen in your belly. And then your chest will rise, but we want that to rise last. Okay, so when we breathe through our chest, all these emergency muscles along the side of the neck and the traps, all those muscles are emergency muscles. So we don't want to be using those regularly as we're breathing, because what happens is we start breathing through our chest a lot. We start to excite these muscles along the traps and along the neck. And what that does is that can tighten our shoulders, leading to poor posture, tightening your chest, and it's going to make it hard to, you know, raise your hands overhead and do kettlebell exercises, you know, which we all love doing. So we want to make sure that we clear the breathing out. Okay, so one of the breathing techniques we're going to do is called Ujjayi yoga breathing. Okay, so it's basically you're breathing in and out through the nose. Okay, you're going to keep your mouth closed, but it has a very distinct sound to it, the way you know that you're doing it properly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scoot up to the camera a little bit so you can kind of hear me. So it's not going to be a traditional nasal breath like that. This one's going to be a little different. And to test it out first, to give you an idea of what we're doing, you're going to open your mouth and you're going to breathe like you're inhaling through the back of the throat. That's the kind of breath we're going to be focusing on. But what you're going to do is you're going to do that technique. You're going to feel the back of your throat dry out. That's how you know you're doing it right. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep our mouth closed. We're going to breathe in through the nose and in through the back of the throat, down into the belly. So it's going to look like this. Can you hear that? So it's called Ujjayi yoga breathing. So we're going to be focusing using that breathing technique as we're going through our progressions to the straddle splits. And what that breathing is going to do, essentially, without getting carried away into the science and the rationale for it, is basically going to really help us to focus on our relaxation portion. Okay, so we want to focus on being relaxed in specific times for the straddle split. So one of the first things we're gonna start with to progress to the side straddle split is we're gonna focus on the goblet squat. Okay, and we got to focus on learning how to create using our strength, creating space, and sorry, I just had a phone call come through. Using strength, creating space, and spreading the load. So we're gonna focus on those 3 S's. And we're going to focus on crucial part of attaining the split is your pelvis is two. It's separate. Your pelvis should be able to move and open up like this. Okay, shouldn't be singed tight like this. Okay, and it gets like this whenever we sit a lot. Okay, so we got to focus on doing is allowing our body to and allowing our hips to open and to separate. So our pelvis has 2 halves. We got to get really good on separating those 2 halves. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the goblet squat. So that's what we're going to cover today, is the goblet squat as one of the first progressions to attaining the side straddle split. So I'm going to show you how I set up for the goblet squat. So we're going to use a kettlebell. I'm going to focus this down just a little bit. Okay, so we're going to use a bell. Okay, what size bell? It's just something heavy enough to give you a good counterweight. Okay, now to really quick to do a little test to see if you have to find out if you have a mobility flexibility problem, or we want to find out, do you have a stability problem? And one simple way to test that is to get into a body weighted squat. Okay. So I'm going to turn to the side here, and I'm going to use the kettlebell as a counterbalance. Here's how you can tell if you've got a flexibility problem or flexibility / mobility problem, or if you have a stability problem. If you have a stability problem, as soon as you get onto this squat, you're going to fall backwards. That's how you can tell you have a stability problem. Now, if you can get into this position, but maybe you need to hold on to a door, like the door or the wall, or maybe a kettlebell, but you can access this position while giving yourself a counterweight. If you can access this with a counterweight, what that means is you have a stability problem, not a mobility and flexibility problem, because you demonstrated that you've got the mobility, you just needed some kind of external weight, like a door jamb or a kettlebell, to give you the stability. Okay, so we need both stability, mobility, flexibility. We need all those to work together in synergy. So do that little test before you do this. That way you'll have an idea of what we need to do to correct that. Okay, so if you can sit down, okay, almost rock bottom, but you're going to fall back and you need to hold onto a door jamb, that means you've got a stability problem. If you just can't access, if you start squatting here and you kind of stop right here and you can't get any lower, then you have a flexibility and mobility problem. And we can go towards fixing that on another video. But what we're going to focus on right now is the goblet squat and how to use the goblet squat to start as the first step towards attaining our side straddle split. So I always recommend, and this is how I teach it, starting the goblet squat from the ground up, because that's how we learned how to squat as individuals, as infants, is we learned how to push from the floor, push back into our feet, okay? So the first thing that we did is we used our hands and we pushed our weight back to our feet, okay? And we're going to use the bell as a counterweight. So from the goblet squat position, you're going to curl the bell to your chest. Okay? Now, here's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to use strength. So I'm going to use my hip flexors, and I'm going to actively pull my body down. And then I'm going to use my elbows inside my knees, and I'm going to push my knees apart, and I'm going to begin to move, and I'm going to begin to pry side to side. And then I use my breathing. Okay? I'll come out. And then you're going to come to all fours, and we're going to rock back and forth just like this. You're going to rock for, I don't know, 10 to 15 rocks. You're going to get back onto your feet. Curl the belly to your chest. Chest tall. Actively pull down with your hip flexors. Push your knees open with your elbows. And you're going to begin to pry the hips side to side. I'm going to turn to the front. So you can see I'm actively prying side to side like this. You can imagine you have a pen on your butt, and you're going to draw like a figure 8. Okay? So we're prying at the hips here. This is going to be one of the first steps to achieving the side straddle split. Then after that, we'll go into a static practice in our actual split. But that's going to be the first step. That's what we're going to be covering today. So if you have any questions, leave some comments below. If you're enjoying these videos, be sure to subscribe at the bottom. That way you get alerts when I go live. So we're going to be covering like a 4-part series on what I plan to do and basically my journey of attending the side straddle split. And this is something I'm going to be doing every morning as a part of my miracle morning practice. So things you want to focus on is, first, do your test. Do you have a mobility or do you have a stability problem? Simply by doing that, do a body weighted squat. If you can't get past parallel, okay, if you can't break past parallel, that means more than likely you have a mobility or flexibility problem before you've got the mobility problem. If you can break parallel, but you need some kind of like a door jam or a kettlebell to give you that stability, that means that you have more of a, what's up J-Bot? That means you have more of a stability, not a flexibility problem. So do that little test, and then from there, start practicing the goblet squat from the ground up. Work on using your strength to pull yourself down with the hip flexors, and then you're gonna move side to side. Okay, imagine like you're drawing a figure 8 with your butt, and you're gonna begin to pry and move the hips. And what you're trying to do with that pry is your pelvis has 2 halves. We got to really focus on allowing those 2 halves to separate, because that's gonna be crucial for doing the split. Is you have to get them to separate. And this is kind of where we're gonna start reverse engineering. You can't just go right. Here's where people make a mistake with the split. And this was me in the beginning, before I knew any of this stuff. Is many people, when they try to do the split, is they'll just kind of get in this position like this, and they'll just like kind of, and they're just kind of like muscling their way, trying to get into the split. You can't do that. What you gotta do is you gotta reverse engineer it. You gotta go through and break down piece by piece. And then eventually you can get into that position and work on prying and getting into a deeper straddle. So first thing we got to do is we got to address things like breathing. We got to address things like, do you have a mobility or flexibility problem? Do you have, and addressing starting with a goblet squat. So tomorrow we're going to be introducing our next progression on attaining the straddle split. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get back to my practice. And I'm going to keep working on the goblet squat, and then I'm actually going to go into my straddle, and I'm going to finish off reading my book. So that's all I got for you guys today. Thanks for tuning in. And if you have any questions or comments or anything like that, leave them in the comment section below. Be sure to hit the little button on your bottom right if you want to be notified on my next live stream. Have a great day, guys. Bye.